Good morning, CLC. Good morning. Welcome to a lovely Sunday. I hope you had an amazing, fantastic week, and I hope you are thrilled and excited for the week to come. I am going to try to not be up here too long because I am thrilled and excited for the talk to come. She is here every single week working behind the camera, but we have a special treat. Right here on this stage, up front, is going to be Reverend Lisa Ryan in just a few minutes. Now we come to our inner healing experience. I invite you to just take a few deep breaths. Relax your body. Relax your mind. Slow yourself down, putting all things outside on the back burner for now. And just be here now. Universal love enfolds me. Universal wisdom inspires me. Universal spirit enlightens me. Universal power encircles me. I am one, and all is well. As we begin the inner healing process, let me invite you to relax in quiet confidence, opening yourself to the miracle-working higher power. Now symbolize the unity of your thinking and feeling nature by touching your chest with your right hand, and let my words act as your own for your own inner healing, acceptance, and receptivity. I acknowledge that there is a power, intelligence, and wisdom greater than my own. I am in the midst of it, and it is in the midst of me, sensitive and responsive to my every thought, word, action, and feeling. I now make this true for myself by saying aloud, I acknowledge. Acknowledging the higher power working through my life, I admit that I am personally responsible for solving my own problems while being guided and assisted by something greater than myself. As I am ready to surrender the conflicts of my ego to the wisdom of the infinite presence, I simply speak these words: I surrender. Knowing that forgiveness is the key to unconditional love and the feeling of heaven, I now unconditionally forgive anyone and everyone who has ever injured me in any way, real or imagined. And I now forgive myself for all my mistaken judgments and their resulting actions. From my deepest level of understanding, I now say, I forgive. Realizing that I continually experience the effects of my own thinking, I now choose to allow this higher power to recreate me deeply, filling my mind with thoughts that are only positive, constructive, loving, and beautiful. I call upon this divine inflow by stating aloud, I choose. I now center upon that one special idea that I'm willing to accept as real for me in this coming week. Visualizing the idea as already acted upon and brought to pass. In seeing my idea become a fact of my experience, I enjoy the happiness and peace of my thought fulfilled and gratefully speak these words: I accept. Knowing that I have an everlasting place in the midst of the power that sustains all creation, as well as the support of all those around me, I allow myself to relax in the peace of fulfillment and gratitude and say, I release. Now, in my mind's eye, I envision the presence of someone near and dear to me. This can be a friend, a family member, a teacher or mentor, someone who has touched my life in deep and loving ways. Someone who may not be physically present in the room with me this morning. I turn toward that image in my mind's eye and say, I am grateful for the good in your life. Now I open my eyes, turn to the world around me, and joyfully speak to anyone physically present or virtually on this broadcast and sharing gratitude and confidence in saying, I am grateful for the good in your life. And now, because I forgot and kind of skipped over it, I invite you to say with me, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all the good I am and have, all the good I give and receive. I am prosperous now, and so it is.
I'm going to rewrite my talk right now on stage just because of that song. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I've already rewritten it once. When I originally gave Jesse this title, I was like, it's the basics of science and mind. We'll do the light within. I had just seen something inspiring about light within, whatever. And I actually wrote the talk. And then 2 weeks ago, I was in the park on Saturday and went, I have a new idea. So I rewrote the talk again. So literally when I emailed my notes to myself, because I'll let you in a little bit on this process, what I do is I take notes on my phone as inspiration comes to me. I have a note app on my phone. And so I take notes on my phone, and then when I'm ready to organize my notes so that I can do the talk, I email them to myself and put them in an order that makes sense, at least to me. Maybe not to anybody else, but I emailed the notes to myself and realized I had 2 complete talks. And I was like, okay, so which one am I going to do? I'm saving the light within for another time. I'm going to do a back to the basics, which the light was in was a back to the basics too. But let's start off with why we go back to the basics in January, because that's kind of what sparked me to rewrite this talk. Why do we go back to the basics in January? Any of you who've been around for more than, 3 or 4 years have got to be, every time we get to January, like, really? We're going to go back to the basics again? We're going to do this again? Didn't we just do this 12 months ago? Why do we do this? Well, I have some thoughts. One of them being maybe because Ernest Holmes' birthday was just a couple of days ago. And so we go back to the basics in honor of our founder, in honor of Ernest. So we go back and we go, okay, let's bare bones it and go, what does he teach? There's also a little bit of the new year, new you, which might be what I'm talking about. We'll see. And there's also people, one of the best things about Science of Mind is you can come in any time and not have to start. You don't have to come in January. You don't have to come in January. You can kind of pick it up where you are when you come in. So new people kind of come, they discover us all times of the year. So in January, for the benefit of those people, we go back to the basics. But on Saturday in the park, it occurred to me that it's a good idea to go back to the basics for those of us who've been around for a while. I don't know how long y'all have been around. I got here in 2005. So that's 15 years. And I actually did show up in January. Just because, that's the way my life works. But what had occurred to me is that I've been around for 15 years. I know this stuff. I know this stuff pretty well. I kind of have to know this stuff pretty well simply because I took all of the classes up to practitioner training, and then I took practitioner training, and then I went to ministerial school. So I know this stuff. And yet, going back to the basics, for me, it's not just a refresher. It's not reminding me all of the stuff that I know. What it is bringing all of the experience that I have had, particularly over the last year, but over the last 15 years. In Jesse's case, we won't talk about, 30 years of experience. When we go back to the basics, we bring all of that experience with us back to the bare bones. And I can tell you that we see something new every time. We see something we didn't see last year. We see something new we didn't see 5 years ago. We see something new we didn't see 30 years ago. So when we go back to the basics, when we strip all of and I'm going to use the noise of the world away and go back to the bare bones, then we see something new that we can apply. It can make a major change, or it can make a small tweak. And that's all it takes to make a big change. So that's why we go back to the basics. It's about adjusting what we already know based on previous experience. And that's what wisdom is. Knowledge, I had a professor in school who talked about data, or data, whichever way you want to, or information. So knowledge, information, and data, they're all really the same thing. They're literally just numbers. They're literally just words. What wisdom is when we take that knowledge, that information, that data, and apply it. We add experience to it, and that's where wisdom comes from. So we apply our wisdom back to our basics. I keep using this phrase, building from the bones up. I stole it from a Hallmark movie. Well, if I'm giving credit, I didn't really steal it, right? Building from the bones up. I'm sure we all know the trope in the Hallmark movies, because they've got, 12 scripts? They do 40 Christmas movies a year, and they've got 12 scripts. And in this one, it's a hockey player who has an injury, and he has done absolutely everything to rehab it. And it still it's not quite strong enough. Well, fortunately, his manager happens to be cousins to a ballet dancer who happened to have had the same injury. And she rehabbed herself and got back to the level she was before. And he's like, oh, go, fall in love with my cousin, basically. It's a Hallmark movie, let's be honest. But that's the truth, because in there she says, what I am teaching you is to start with the bare bones. We're going to go back to all those little bitty muscles that you have been neglecting and build them up to support what you're doing. That's what January is about. January is about stripping it back down to all those little bitty muscles that we've been neglecting all year and building it back up so that we come back stronger and more able to handle this. And why am I talking about this? Because I just did it. I started running 3 years ago in January. I'm not sure I can tell you why I started running other than I had energy and needed something to do. So I started running. And it has been fantastic for me on a number of levels. But in August, we went for a run in a park we don't normally run in because we were just happened to be in that part of town. And nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. But I went home, I took a nap, I woke up, and I went, something doesn't feel right. And yet on Tuesday, I still got up and I went for that run. And I was like, something does not feel right. On Thursday, I got up and I went for that run. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I've got to quit. So I quit running. I kept walking. I kept doing all the other things. I kept exercising, but I quit running. And I missed it. And I missed it a lot. And finally, everything seemed to go back to some sort of normal. I was like, okay, I'm going to try running again. So we went to the park, and we went to the park we always go to. And I was like, I'm just going to run the little short. I'm going to run, and I'm going to walk, and I'm going to run, and I'm going to walk. I'm fine. And I did that. And everything was good. And I was like, I can do this. So I did another loop. And I got tired. And I was almost done. And I was like, I'm almost done. I'm going to push it. Oops. If you have ever felt that feeling, that I didn't break anything, but I didn't snap anything, but that's what it felt like. It was a definite pain. And I went, okay, now I've done it. Now what am I going to do? And this time the pain was unbearable. Now, that happened on a Saturday, and I think it was the end of September. And I got to work on Monday, and I was about in tears. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to be on my feet for 8 hours in this much pain. I can't do this. So I made a phone call. This time, I called a professional and asked for help. We set the appointment, and I showed up for the appointment, and I don't even know how to explain that. But she said, I think you sprained it. There's probably a little bit of arthritis going on in there. And so we'll do something about that. And then she proceeded to give me the worst massage I have ever had. Because it was a deep tissue, let's move joints and ligaments around. She did it right, but it hurt. And then she did something that I hadn't done before. She took me into another room, and she ran me through a series of strengthening exercises, physical therapy. And then she said, I want you to do these exercises this many times, twice a day, and then come back in a week. Okay. She was expensive because until I meet my deductible, my insurance wasn't going to cover that. So I paid a whole lot of money for those physical therapy exercises. You better believe that I went home and I did them twice a day. And they hurt. But I did them anyway. Because there's a difference between hurting when you're strengthening and hurting when you have damaged something. And we talked about that before I left the office. Okay, if it hurts this way, am I still okay? Yes. And then I went back in a week, and she checked my range of motion. She did the terrible massage again, and then she changed the exercises and gave me more. And when I walked into the office for that second appointment, I said, by the way, I really hate this exercise. And she went, oh, well, that means you're doing them. Because let me tell you this, when you're dealing with physical therapy, they know when you're doing them and when you're not. It's kind of easy to tell who's been doing them and who's been not. So I'm sitting here and I'm talking about running and physical therapy, and what has that got to do with science of mind and the basics? That's what spiritual practices are. The spiritual practices are your basics. They are literally your physical therapy for your spirit and your soul. Do you do them every day? I'm not making you bad and wrong if you don't. But what I'm telling you is that when you do them every day, you get stronger. You build from the bones up. So that when you go back into your regular life after having some kind of crisis, the progress to get back where you were is faster. Because when I started running, literally my goal was from one light pole to the next. And I did that for I don't know how long, until one day I went, I'm going to try for the next light pole. So I would literally run from one light pole to the next light pole, and then I'd walk until I could run again. So 3 years later, I'm back to running from light pole to light pole. It probably took me 3 months before I was really comfortable running 2 light poles. This time it took me a week and a half. And then I'm running 2 light poles. Now, granted, I did just get permission to start running. I've been running for maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And I admit that when she gave me permission to run again, I was scared. Because it hurt so much. And I didn't want to do it again. But I made a decision. I don't know if you can see these fancy shoes that I'm wearing. They're black shoes, and they have white writing on them. And what they say is run happy. If you've ever bought running shoes, they are expensive. They are worth every penny, but they are expensive. So the day before I was going to start running again, I was like, if I'm going to start running, I have got to buy new shoes. Because my shoes, before I injured myself, were pretty worn out. That may have contributed to it. So, have you worn out your spiritual practices? Do you need to tweak them, or maybe find something a little different and a little new? I'm not advocating expensive spiritual practices. The good news is most of our spiritual practices are free. They only cost you time. And frankly, I think it's worth it. But I called the store and I said, can I buy the shoes? And she said, yes, I will sell them to you over the phone. And then my husband, I called him and said, can you pick my shoes up? Run happy. And then I went to the park. And I ran. And it didn't hurt. And I listened to my body. So when you're doing your spiritual practices, are you listening? Are you listening to your body? Are you listening to your spirit? Are you listening to your soul? Are you listening to the soul? The reason that I injured myself the second time, and I injured myself worse, was because I wasn't listening. So I'm going to go back to this Hallmark movie again. Just in case you want to see it, I think it's the one called Taking a Shot at Love. He shows up late, and because he's late, he gets to take ballet with 4- and 5-year-olds. He takes an hour class with 4- and 5-year-olds, learning the basics of ballet. And the next morning, he gets up, and he can't move. Like, he hurts everywhere. And he's like, I was dancing with 4- and 5-year-olds. Why can I not move? And she just grinned at him and she said, all those little muscles that you've been neglecting. So what do you do in that case of all those little muscles that you've been neglecting and you can't walk? You stretch. Anybody who does any kind of physical exercise, I would bet even Mary knows this, stretching out those hands for playing the harp. Jeffrey knows that. Stretching out the hands. Brian, you got to keep the... So when they ache, what do you have to do? You have to stretch them. So let's go back to talking about spiritual practices again, because that's what they are. They are stretching. I saw a good meme, and it was talking about be willing to fail at something new. Because we're not going to be good the first time we start something. When I taught, I think it was practical mysticism. And when you teach in practical mysticism, what we try and do for 8 weeks is sample different meditation techniques. Because everybody has this idea of what meditation is, where you sit in lotus position with folded, crossed legs on a pillow, and you close your eyes and you think about nothing. Anybody capable of that? Because I'm certainly not. I'm not capable of thinking about nothing. Okay, that's not true. Do you know when I think about nothing? When I run. Absolutely, when I run. And that's the amazing thing about meditation, is you don't have to sit lotus position on a pillow and think about nothing. You can go for a hike. You can listen to music. You can stare at a candle flame. You can do all of these different types of meditation until you find one that works for you. But you got to try it, and then you got to practice it. You got to do it every day. Like I did that physical therapy. You got to do it every day. And if meditation is not the spiritual practice for you, I've got amazing news for you. It's not the only spiritual practice. It is not. There are a myriad of spiritual practices that you can try. And the cool thing about trying out different spiritual practices is all those little muscles that we haven't been using. When you try different spiritual practices, you work different muscles. And you find different ways to become spiritually stronger. And then you find that you have built from the bones up. Now, just for 1 minute, because I've spent this entire time talking about the body, I'm going to switch to computer language. So what's the benefit of daily spiritual practice? What is the benefit of knowing the basics? It's called a default setting. Do you ever have that moment with your electronics where you are like, they are so snarled up, you just can't figure out what to do? And what do? You reset them. You reset them back to their default settings. So I'm going to ask you right now, do you know what your default settings are? Because if you don't, that might be a good place to start your basics. Go back and look at what your default settings are. When you have a moment of crisis, and it doesn't even have to be a crisis, it can be just a minor setback. What are your default settings? What do you go back to? And how far back do you go? Because if you have been working your daily spiritual practices and you have been trying new spiritual practices, and what I would tell you is don't load your plate up with spiritual practices. In good, healthy eating, you don't do that. You do a little bit of this, a little bit of this, and a little bit of this, right? And that's exactly the way spiritual practices should be. You should have one really good spiritual practice that you love and that you practice most of the time, whatever it is. Be it meditation, be it reading, be it listening to music, whatever your spiritual practice is, there's a whole bunch of them. You should have that one. And then you should be willing to try a little bit. But you don't want spiritual practices to fill up your plate, because we got a life, right? We all have jobs, we have family, we have things to do. But be willing to try little spiritual practices on the side. Be willing to fail at something new, because you might find something that you love. But in the process of doing all of this, you'll strengthen all of those little muscles. I do work with a personal trainer once a week, and he believes in muscle confusion. Every day that I show up, my workout looks different. And some days I hurt after the workout, and some days I don't. And the days that I don't, he's worked all the muscles that I know how to work. And the days that I do hurt, I know he found a muscle I didn't know I had. So that's the benefit of trying different spiritual exercises. So I'm going to give you one last thing about that default setting. So I realized I haven't looked at my notes at all. I made the joke about the default setting, about going back and building back. There's a Bible quote, I believe it's a parable of Jesus, about building a firm foundation. Because when you build on sand, your foundations continue to shift underneath you. When you go back to the bare bones, like we have done in January, we have gone back to the foundation, and you start building on that firm foundation, your walls aren't going to slip. So that when the winds come, your house isn't going to move. Your soul isn't going to move. Your spirit isn't going to move. You are going to withstand just about anything that comes at you. And when you have a good base, yeah, this is another Hallmark movie. It's like having a good cake mix, and then you can add any kind of ingredient that you want and come out with different cakes, or cookies, or brownies. It all goes back to that good, firm foundation. And I made the comment about the default setting. Going back to the basics in January is about checking out all of those bad habits that we may have picked up over the year. They may not be really bad, but if we don't catch them, then they can build into ingrained habits that we are not even aware of, and they become part of our default setting. So we went to the park yesterday, and we ran 2 loops, which is just over 3 miles. I'm still in the run walk, and yes, I was pushing it, but I was listening as I was pushing it. And so we're done, and we get back to the car, and we can't find the car key. 1 loop around that park is 1.7 miles. We have no idea where this car key is. And for 1 brief minute, we freaked out. And then we went, okay, what do we do? So what we did, this comes back to default setting, is we trusted. He went one way, I went the other. We walked the loop. We didn't find the key. Where we met is where the ROTC from the local high school meets. There were a bunch of kids there. And we said, hey, as you are working out in the park, can you keep your eye out for this key? We don't know where it is. There were also maintenance people over there. We'll check with the maintenance people. We live probably 1.5 miles from the park. Now, mind you, I had just run 3 miles. I'm 3 months off of a knee injury. And I said, I have an ordination ceremony to be to in 1.5 hours. He has to be to work in 1 hour. I walked home from the park. I walked home from the park. You want to talk about default settings? Do I ache a little bit today? Yes. But I'm moving. I got home, I got the key, I got his backup key, I got in my car, I drove back to the park. I'm about to enter the gate, I call him and I tell him I'm here, and he says, they found it. So the good news is we found the key. But the better news is, at no time did we completely lose our minds. I didn't say we didn't lose our minds. We didn't completely lose our minds. But we took the steps we needed to because we have those default settings. So in those moments of, oh my God, what do? We were prepared to respond, not react. And I walked home. It didn't hurt to walk home. The months of physical therapy that I did every day, twice a day, most of the time. Most of the time. Worked. So my gift to you is go back to the basics. Bring the wisdom, the knowledge, the experience that you have gained over this year, over however many years, over your lifetime, and bring them back to the basics. And find something new that you didn't know you had. And work on those little muscles that you didn't know you had. Because then you will truly be building a firm foundation, and then it won't matter what happens around you. You will be okay. And that's my time, I think. But one of the basics of science of mind is the treatment. So I'm going to end you there. And I'm going to know that there is one life, one power, one presence, one love. I know that that love flows through me. I know that that love flows in me. And I know that that love is me. And because I know that in the one life, then I know that that love flows through each and every one of you. And it is through that love that we reveal the kingdom of heaven around us now. It's always there. And as we open to it in that love, this world becomes amazing. And so I encourage you to open into that love, to feel it flowing through you, to know it flowing through you, to know that at the very bare bones basic of who we are love. And what we build up from that, we do with knowledge, we do with kindness, we do with compassion, and we do with love. Because that is who we are. That is what we are. And I know this with all of the peace, the love, the joy, and gratitude within me. And I relax, release, and know that it is so. And so it is.
Thank you, Brian, Mary, Jeffrey, viewers, listeners, students in Michigan, Canada. Oh, and who else? Is there somewhere and I'm overlooking? That was awesome. Reverend Lisa Ryan. I always think you run so others don't have to. I say the same thing to Reverend Arthur Johnson. So, thank you all so much for watching today. And, you know, when I was new in Science of Mind many, many years ago and learned about spiritual mind treatment, I thought, that's just great. If I ever need that, I'll use it. And that's not how it works, is it? No. Regular spiritual practice. When Danielle gave the announcement, she took you through various portals into this teaching. You don't have to sign up for a whole bunch of weeks, some money changing hands. We have book studies, we have discussions, and these are what we offer now as the entry points into developing a regular spiritual practice. More are being added every week, and throughout the summer. More and more opportunities for you. Furthermore, as you know, we are not the only spiritual center on planet Earth. There are a great many others within Centers for Spiritual Living and Unity and affiliated teachings, and really the list is endless. Get them where you can. Get them where you can and put them all together. And you might even find, too, that you go back to your childhood and you rediscover some spiritual practices that you kind of blew off when you were a kid because they seemed sort of uncool and the older people were doing them. And the older people were doing them because they work. So that's just my follow-up to what you were saying. That was an awesome way that you put it. And now I'm going to do, Lisa ended, as we do with our talks, with a spiritual mind treatment. I'm going to do another one, which is not gilding the lily. It's just going to take it in a little further, a different direction, really, to close out the service. So I just invite you to close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. And the reason that we do that is to focus, is to have a clearer idea. Now, you just heard a song, and I just heard a song where some names were called out. And it reminded me that at this time of the year, about every 4 years, we bless the president and the vice president, we bless the Senate and the House of Representatives and the cabinet and everyone else who has a role in the function of government here. And so I'm knowing today that President Biden and Vice President Harris and all who serve the Supreme Court and everyone else and our local officials, they come and go, they're elected at various times, and they come into the roles that they play. And what I'm knowing here is simply this. And I think that every person in this country would be willing to join me in this knowing that infinite wisdom is guiding each one. Divine awareness, whatever the God of our understanding, whatever the hopeful outcomes that we have in terms of policy and procedure, let us know that there is one life. That life is God. That life is all the life there is. And that life made every last one of us, including those who serve at the highest levels. That life is infinite wisdom. It's pouring through these individuals now. It's guiding their thoughts, guiding their actions into the most salutary and beneficent and kindly possible policies that could be developed for the greatest good of all of us. And knowing this, saying these words and feeling these feelings, a sense of relief and trust and peace comes over me as I know that ultimately we all, if you will, submit to a higher authority. There is a power greater than we are, yet right where we are, that we can use and be used by. And this power working through us now is bringing about, in some form or fashion, the realization of heaven on earth. For this knowing, for its manifestation in form, I am so deeply grateful. I release this word now into the infinite, calling it done, and so it is. All right, thank you all so much. Oh, that's right. I got all carried away singing. Say with me now, something wonderful is happening through me.
Something wonderful is happening through me.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in everything I am.
I feel it in everything I am.
I choose it. I trust it. I use it.
I use it.
And I love it.
And I love
And
it.
so it is.
So it is.